Hey everyone watching this story right now, where are you tuning in from? Comment your city or country below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if you believe in karma, justice, and second chances. The morning sunlight slanted across the wide glass doors of Regal National Bank, bouncing off the polished marble floors and expensive chandeliers. Inside, customers stood in quiet lines, filling out forms and waiting for their turns, the smell of perfume and paper thick in the air. Among them was a young woman named Alina Brooks, dressed simply in jeans and a soft blue shirt, her hair tied neatly in a bun. She looked nervous but composed as she held a white envelope in her hand, a check that represented more than money. It represented a dream, a fresh start, a chance to prove she could stand on her own 2 feet. It had been months of hard work, late nights, part-time shifts, and endless planning. But she'd finally earned the small grant she needed to open her own design studio. The check was worth $25,000. Not much to some, but to Alina it was everything. She stepped up to the counter, smiling politely at the manager's assistant. "Good morning. I need to deposit this. Please." The assistant took one look at her, then at the check, and blinked in surprise before glancing nervously at the man standing nearby, the branch manager, Mr. Douglas Crane. He was in his early 50s, tall, with slicked back hair and a suit that screamed authority. His eyes were cold, sharp, and calculating. "I'll handle this," he said, stepping forward. Alina smiled again, unsure of what was wrong. "Is something the matter?" Douglas held the check between his fingers, turning it over as if it were suspicious. "This is a large amount," he said slowly. "You say it's yours?" Alina nodded. "Yes, it's a grant for a business I'm starting. I won it through a design program in New York." He arched a brow, his lips twisting into a smirk. "Really? And you expect me to believe that you earned this? What kind of business?" Her cheeks flushed. "A creative design studio. I specialize in interior concepts." "Interior design," he interrupted, a hint of mockery in his tone. "That's cute." A few customers turned to look. Alina shifted uncomfortably. "Is there a problem?" She asked again, her voice small but firm. "The problem," Douglas said, "is that we have a responsibility to prevent fraud. People try to deposit fake checks all the time, especially ones that look like this." He held it up, waving it slightly. Alina's eyes widened. "It's not fake, sir. I have the documents and emails." He cut her off. "I don't need your stories. This check looks suspicious, and so do you." Her stomach dropped. The humiliation hit her in waves as the people around them began to whisper. She could feel their eyes on her, judging, assuming. "Please," she said quietly, "just call the issuing company. They can verify." But before she could finish, Douglas snapped the check in half. The sound echoed through the lobby like a slap. Paper tore, dreams shattered. "We don't deal with scams here," he said coldly, tossing the pieces into the trash. For a long moment, Alina couldn't move. Her hands trembled. She looked at him, then at the torn check, unable to process what just happened. You can't do that," she whispered. "I just did," he replied, his voice dripping with arrogance. "If you don't want trouble, I suggest you leave before I call security." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She turned around slowly, her legs feeling weak beneath her. The assistant behind the counter looked away, pretending to be busy. The guards by the door watched silently. Not one person said a word. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the injustice that had just happened. Alina stood on the sidewalk, her heart pounding, her fingers digging into the strap of her bag. She'd done everything right, worked hard, earned her opportunity, followed every rule. And yet, with one arrogant gesture, a man had treated her like she was nothing. She took a deep breath. She wouldn't cry here, not in front of strangers. She walked away, her steps steady but heavy. As she disappeared into the crowd, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the bank. The driver stepped out and opened the door for a woman, elegant, powerful, dressed in a charcoal grey suit that seemed to command the very air around her. Her name was Vivian Brooks. She was Alina's mother. Vivian rarely visited this branch herself. Her assistants handled most of her banking. But that day something told her to stop by. Perhaps fate. Perhaps instinct. As she entered, Douglas immediately straightened his tie and smiled. "Mrs. Brooks!" "What an honor. I wasn't expecting you today." Vivian gave a polite nod. I needed to review some private transactions. Is your office available? Of course, he said, eager to impress. He led her through the lobby, still oblivious to the connection between her and the young woman he'd just humiliated. As they passed the counter, a torn piece of paper fluttered from the trash bin, a fragment of Alina's check. Vivian's sharp eyes caught it for a moment, the signature at the bottom vaguely familiar, but she didn't dwell on it. Not yet. In her office, Douglas poured her a glass of water, his tone all charm and flattery. It's always a pleasure to assist one of our most important clients. You're truly an inspiration, managing one of the largest investment firms in the state and still finding time to... Vivian raised a hand. Thank you, Mr. Crane, but let's keep this brief. I'm very busy today. He nodded, his smile stiffening. She began reviewing some papers when her phone buzzed. It was a message from her daughter. Mom, they tore up my check. They said it looked fake. Vivian froze. Her pulse quickened as she reread the words. They tore it up. She turned her gaze slowly toward Douglas, who was adjusting some files, oblivious to the storm he had just unleashed. She didn't say a word. Not yet. She simply stood, slipped her phone into her bag and walked toward the door. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, sharp, deliberate, final. Mr. Crane, she said evenly. I'll be back shortly. Don't go anywhere. And with that she left, her expression calm. But inside her a fury was building. Outside, across the street, she spotted her daughter sitting on a bench, staring down at her hands. Vivian's chest tightened at the sight. Alina looked so small, so defeated, and all because someone had decided she didn't look like she belonged to success. Vivian approached quietly. Alina? Her daughter looked up, startled. Mom, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same, she said gently, sitting beside her. Tell me what happened. The story poured out, the check, the suspicion, the humiliation. Vivian listened in silence, her jaw tightening with each detail. When Alina finished, she whispered, He tore it up right in front of me. Vivian's voice was low, calm, almost too calm. Did you get his name? Douglas Crane. Her mother's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. Good. Stay here, sweetheart. I'll handle this. And without another word, she turned back toward the bank, her stride sharper, her eyes colder than steel. What Douglas Crane didn't know was that the young woman he had just humiliated was the daughter of the CEO of the very corporation that owned his bank. And within the next hour, everything he thought he controlled was about to come crashing down, not with shouting or chaos, but with the quiet, devastating power of a mother protecting her child. Vivian Brooks walked back into Regal National Bank like a storm in heels. The glass doors slid open, and the cool air inside seemed to tense as if it sensed her anger. Every step she took echoed with quiet authority. Customers turned to look, some recognizing her face from business magazines, others simply feeling the weight of her presence. Douglas Crane saw her approach and quickly straightened up. Mrs. Brooks, you're back already. Mr. Crane, she interrupted softly, her voice calm but her eyes were like daggers. I'd like to discuss a situation that just occurred here. He smiled nervously. Of course. Is there a problem? Vivian didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the front counter, where the same assistant from before was pretending to type something. Miss, Vivian said, could you please bring me the check you just discarded about 30 minutes ago? The one a young woman tried to deposit. The assistant froze, color draining from her face. She glanced helplessly at her manager. Douglas's smile faltered. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Vivian stepped closer, her voice still calm but edged with steel. Let me make this simple. You tore up a check belonging to a woman named Alina Brooks. That woman happens to be my daughter. The entire lobby went silent. So even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause. Douglas blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish caught out of water. Your daughter? Yes, she said, folding her arms. And I'd like to know on what grounds you humiliated her, called her a fraud and destroyed a legally issued check without investigation. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. Mrs. Brooks, I had no idea. She didn't have to mention, Vivian said sharply. You judged her the moment you saw her. You looked at a black woman holding a large check and assumed she was lying. Didn't you? He swallowed hard. I assure you that's not what happened. Vivian raised her hand. Save your breath. I've heard this song before. She turned to the assistant. Retrieve the pieces of that check, now. The assistant scrambled to the trash bin, her hands shaking as she pulled out the torn fragments. Vivian took them gently, placing them in her purse. That, she said, is evidence. I'll have my legal team contact your head office this afternoon. Mrs. Brooks, please, Douglas said, his voice cracking. It was an honest mistake. I didn't mean any disrespect. Vivian's eyes burned with quiet rage. You didn't mean disrespect. You looked my daughter in the eye and made her feel small in front of a room full of strangers. You tore apart her dream and called it fake. Tell me, Mr. Crane, how many other people have you treated this way? He had no answer. Vivian turned toward the other customers who were watching silently. This is exactly how systemic arrogance hides, behind polite smiles and procedures. You tear down people's confidence one small humiliation at a time, and then you call it professionalism. Her voice was powerful now, calm yet cutting. But today you picked the wrong woman. She looked back at him, her expression hardening. Are you relieved of duty, effective immediately? I've already called the regional board, and in case you're wondering, yes, I own the majority stake in this bank. Gasps rippled through the lobby. The assistant nearly dropped her tablet. Douglas went pale. You what? I own it, she said simply. Every branch, every decision, every policy that allows people like you to hold positions of power. And as of now, I'm changing all of it. She turned to the assistant. Get security to escort him out, kindly. The guards hesitated for a moment, then seeing her authority stepped forward. Douglas backed away, stammering, Please, Mrs. Brooks, I didn't know, I have a family. Vivian's gaze softened slightly but stayed firm. Then you should have remembered that when you humiliated someone else's child. He was led away, his career and reputation destroyed in minutes. The lobby buzzed with whispers. Vivian took a deep breath and looked around. If any of you have ever been treated unfairly here, that ends today, she announced. This bank will now have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, disrespect, and arrogance. The customers clapped quietly. The assistant, eyes brimming with tears, whispered, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Brooks. I didn't stop him. Vivian gave her a gentle nod. It's not too late to start doing the right thing. Outside, the sun had shifted, casting long golden streaks across the street. Alina was still sitting on the bench, head bowed, lost in thought. She didn't notice her mother approach until Vivian placed a hand on her shoulder. Come, Vivian said softly. It's done. Alina looked up, confused. What do you mean? Her mother smiled faintly. He won't be tearing up anyone's dreams ever again. They walked together toward the car. Alina hesitated, her eyes glistening. Mom, you didn't have to do that. Vivian turned to her, her expression both fierce and loving. Yes, I did. Not because you're my daughter, but because no one should ever make you feel like you don't belong where you worked hard to be. For the first time that day, Alina smiled. Thank you. Vivian squeezed her hand. You don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing. Don't let anyone's ignorance make you smaller. You're going to change the world with your work. They got into the car, the city lights beginning to flicker on as evening settled. But as the driver pulled away, something unexpected happened. The bank's regional director called Vivian personally. Mrs. Brooks, the voice said over the phone, tense but respectful. We've reviewed the surveillance footage. It's worse than you think. Mr. Crane has been doing this to customers for years, turning away people based on how they look, what they wear. We're investigating further. Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line. Make sure he never works in this industry again, she said coldly. When she hung up, Alina glanced at her. Is everything okay? Vivian smiled faintly. It will be now. As they drove through the city, the streetlights glowing like quiet witnesses, Vivian looked out the window, deep in thought. Her daughter had faced something cruel, but instead of letting it destroy her, she'd faced it with dignity. And Vivian realized something powerful, that the greatest wealth wasn't money, but integrity. What she didn't know, though, was that the story wasn't entirely over. Someone from inside the bank, one of Douglas's close allies, had recorded the entire confrontation on their phone and was about to send it to the media. By morning, the video would go viral across the country, sparking debates, outrage, and ultimately change. But for now, all was quiet. The mother and daughter sat side by side, a silent bond between them stronger than any check or title could represent. The next morning, the city was awake before the sun. Screens flickered, phones buzzed, and the video of Vivian Brooks confronting the arrogant bank manager had already exploded across social media. Millions of people had seen it. The billionaire CEO standing up for her daughter, calling out discrimination in the middle of her own bank. Headlines flooded every major site. CEO exposes bank manager's bias. Justice served in real time. Mother defends daughter in viral confrontation and teaches a nation about respect. And trending right beneath it, Vivian Brooks. Respect all to can change starts here. But while the world cheered, not everyone was celebrating. In a dim apartment across the city, Douglas Crane sat hunched over his phone, the blue light washing over his tired face. His career was gone, his reputation ruined. Messages from former co-workers were filled with either pity or contempt. He'd been fired, publicly humiliated, and his wife hadn't come home the night before. He replayed the video, Vivian's calm, sharp words cutting through him again and again. You judged her the moment you saw her. At first he'd been angry, bitter. He'd told himself he didn't deserve this. But the more he watched, the more the truth sank in, that he had been exactly what she accused him of. His arrogance, his quiet bias, his automatic disbelief, all the little things that he'd convinced himself were just procedure. They weren't. They were the walls he'd built to protect his own sense of superiority. And now those walls had collapsed. For the first time in years, Douglas felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Shame. Meanwhile, at the Brooks estate, Alina was pacing the living room. Mom, this is insane. It's everywhere. People are messaging me non-stop. Vivian, seated by the window with her coffee, smiled faintly. Good, let them talk. Sometimes stories like this need to be told out loud. But Mom, Alina said softly, what if this ruins your reputation? What if people think you only care about this because it happened to me? Vivian looked up, her eyes calm but firm. Let them think what they want. What matters is the truth. And the truth is that this isn't just about us. It's about everyone who's ever been dismissed, doubted, or disrespected for no reason. Alina nodded slowly. She'd always admired her mother's strength, but now, seeing her face that strength towards something so personal, she felt inspired in a way she never had before. A few hours later, there was a knock on their front gate. The guard called up to the house. Ma'am, there's someone here asking to see you. Says his name is Douglas Crane. Alina's stomach dropped. He's here? Vivian hesitated for a moment, then stood. Let him in. When Douglas entered the house, he looked like a completely different man. The crisp arrogance from before was gone, replaced by quiet exhaustion. He held his hat in his hands, eyes downcast. Mrs. Brooks, he began, voice trembling, I came to apologize. Not because I was caught, not because I lost my job, but because I realized I've spent years treating people the wrong way. Vivian studied him carefully. Go on. I used to think I was just doing my job. That being cautious meant being professional. But I wasn't cautious, I was cruel. I've been working in banks for 20 years, and I can't even count how many times I've turned someone away just because they didn't look like they belonged. He looked up, tears brimming in his eyes. Your daughter? She was the first person who looked me in the eye and didn't argue back. That silence hit me harder than any insult could. I wanted to apologize to her personally. Vivian said nothing. Instead, she gestured toward the staircase where Alina stood silently watching. Douglas turned to her. Miss Brooks, he said softly, I can't undo what I did, but I can start doing better. I wanted you to know that you opened my eyes. I didn't see you for who you were, and now I can't stop seeing the person I ignored. Alina swallowed hard. You didn't just tear a check, Mr. Crane. You tore something inside me, something that told me I had to prove myself every time I walked into a room. But if you're truly sorry, then start proving it by being better to others. That's how you make it right. Douglas nodded, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. I will, I promise. Vivian's expression softened. Change starts with admitting you were wrong. I'll make sure the board knows you came here. Not for your job, but for your conscience. He nodded again, then slowly left the house. As the gates closed behind him, Alina turned to her mother. Do you really think he'll change? Vivian looked out at the driveway, where the morning light fell in soft gold streaks. Maybe not overnight, but sometimes one hard lesson can fix what a lifetime of comfort never could. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alina sat at her desk with a laptop open. Her email notifications were endless, messages from strangers around the world. People thanking her, sharing their own stories of being dismissed and disrespected. She began replying to them one by one, her words simple but powerful. You're not invisible. Keep believing in yourself. Then she opened a blank document and started typing something new, an idea she'd been holding on to for years, a non-profit initiative that would help young women and men learn financial literacy, career skills, and self-worth, especially those who had been overlooked by society. She named it Project Respect. When Vivian peeked into her room and saw her typing, she smiled. Starting something new? Alina nodded. Something good. Vivian chuckled softly. That's my girl. Weeks later, Project Respect launched publicly, backed by Vivian's company and fueled by Alina's passion. It gained traction fast, becoming a symbol of empowerment and equality, a movement born from one painful moment that turned into a message for millions. And somewhere in a modest community center across town, Douglas Crane sat in the back of a seminar, taking notes, listening, learning. When Alina walked onto the stage that day to give her first public talk, she spotted him in the crowd. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave him a small nod. He nodded back. In that moment, both understood something deeper. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was power. And as the applause filled the room, Alina felt something she hadn't felt that day in the bank. Peace. Her mother was right. Wealth wasn't about what was in your account. It was about what was in your heart and what you gave back to the world.